Absolutely. Joe, thank you very much, sir. It's been a pleasure. Here comes Joe Tait.
You know, Joe, we've reached that time, and I'll tell you, I must say, it's really been a privilege for me to work with you doing this over the last 20 years. I've been here for most of those post games, except for those West Coast games where you would send me off at halftime. But, you know, I talked with you earlier today, and prior to working with you, I heard you as a listener. Then I met you as an aspiring sportscaster, and as you get ready to do it to it for the last time, I want to simply thank you. I want to thank you for your friendship, and thank you for some unforgettable, great radio as you have painted the picture and told the stories of the Cavaliers over the years and entertained us all. And I wish you and Jeannie nothing but the best as you go forward, Joe.
Well, thank you, Mike. And knowing what your schedule has been and is, you weren't an aspiring sportscaster. You were a perspiring sportscaster.
There you are. You've always got the right thing to say. You're right. Joe, your sense of humor has made us all feel better about life in Northeast Ohio for almost 40 years now. Thank you.
That's going to do it for yours truly, and I mean that in more ways than one. But it's been a real ball over the years that I've spent here talking to you folks, and I enjoy the response that I have received from you, believe me, very, very sincerely. So stay tuned. There'll be more coming on the post game with Mike Snyder, and we'll see you down the line. This is Joe Tait. Have a good life, everybody.
What if a bank did more than take care of your money and took the time to take care of what's really important? Unlock your possibilities. Stop into your nearest Key Bank.
Good evening. I'm Bill Kaler, President of Key Community Bank. We are proud to be a sponsor of the Cleveland Cavaliers and a presenting sponsor of Fox Sports Ohio's tribute to Joe Tait. Tonight's show will be shown with limited commercial interruptions. We hope you enjoy the show.
Just ahead of more music and Dave Coffee, weather words for Terre Haute, Clinton, Rockville, and all of the Wabash Valley. Mostly sunny today, fair tonight, partly sunny Saturday, and continued warm. In Terre Haute, 75 degrees, skies are fair. Joe Tait reporting, WBOW News.
This is WBOW, AM and FM, Terre Haute, Indiana.
1230 WBOW.
Basketball coach Bill Shepard has resigned his position at Carmel High School, but will remain with the school as athletic director and cross-country coach. Joe Tait, WBOW Sports.
Turn and back to throw goes Verby. Gets away from one, gets away from another. Throws down for Thompson at the 15. He's at the 10. He's out of bounds at the 7-yard line. It's all over. What an upset. Lagodi beats the Seymour Owls 80-78. We'll be back to wrap it up in a moment.
Opening night crowd urging the Cavaliers on to bigger and better things. The San Diego Rockets 47 and the Cleveland Cavaliers 32. And Bill Fitch says, let's talk it over.
Well, he was painting a good picture right from day one. Most of our games were all filmed. We filmed 16 millimeter, and we'd tear them apart, and it'd take you 24 hours to get it together, and maybe a game would go by before you got all your coaching outtakes together. And we'd listen to a lot of times to Joe's broadcasts, and it was like watching a film. He was that accurate, and yet he could add some excitement to a 10-point loss. You sound like it might go into overtime.
You know, it was all new. I was going places and doing things I'd never done before in my life, and I think that's one of the reasons why Nick Maletti and Bill Fitch felt they had to have somebody like me.
Yeah, when I was coaching at Coe, I was an assistant in football, and I was doing all the scouting. And so I spent a lot of time in the Monmouth booth watching our opponents play Monmouth. And I kept hearing this voice announcing the ball games, and he was pretty good. And got to know Joe, who was doing all this, and then I got to listen to him, and he did the basketball when I'd be coaching and be down in Monmouth. I would see him, and I really appreciated the fact that he was a student and was very good.
Well, ironically, he was the first fellow I ever interviewed in terms of a taped interview when he got the co-college basketball job. They were in the same conference.
Monmouth had a very poor one-loss record, and I don't know whether that was Joe's fault or not, but I thought he handled the losses very well. So he fit into what we were doing in Cleveland in 1970 with the expansion.
The fact that Bill and I got to know each other, and I think even he would admit we became friends, why it did pay off down the road.
When Nick said, we got to get an announcer, Joe was the first guy I thought of. He's the only guy that we contacted about the job, and I always told Joe, I said, you bid the highest for the job, what you would pay us to get it, and I've never really let him forget that.
One of the other times they've asked him about it, he said, we hired him just based on the amount of food he could eat. So there's a little variable in there in terms of the truth, but I'll guarantee you they did not pay a lot of money for that first job.
We'd lost 15 in a row before we won a ball game, and right after that we went into a slump. We really struggled to get along, and the thing I remember most about that first win, though, is that the New York Times, or the Post, was running a big contest, put a little money into it, and had advertised it. When will the Cadavers win their first ball game? And they no more got it started, and the very first day they had it, we won. In fact, I think we won before the papers hit the streets, and that was our revenge of the cadaver stories that come out of New York.
75-76 was the Miracle in Richfield year, and had Jim Jones not broken his foot between the end of the Washington series and the start of the Boston series, there is no doubt in my mind that the Cavaliers would have won the NBA title that year.
This Miracle of Richfield record, it was a top seller, and number one in the state of Ohio, and number one in the hearts of all Cavalier fans.
It went vinyl, and I think they made 10,000 copies. They all sold out.
We got Campy, we got Jim Jones, and we got Austin Carr. They're all working behind the camera or on the microphone. And they owe it all to Joe. I blame it on Joe. I wanted to make coaches out of them, and he made announcers out of them.
I remember the first time I did a game. We did some home games together before I ventured out on the road, and I never will forget. He had his space, and I'm 6'11". Now Joe is about 6'5", 6'6", and he's as wide as I am, or was at the time. And he put me in a little space that I'm sure a 5-year-old would be cramped in. And his papers and his folders, and he tapes all the stats and all the stuff, his preliminary stuff. I had a space, man. I had to turn sideways in order to do the game. He opens his legs wide. He doesn't close his legs, so and he has elbow room. So Joe takes up a lot of room. So I started to realize that anywhere we went, I was going to be cramped, because this is his baby.
It's not so much that he would sit me down and talk, but I've learned from him over the years. Preparation is very important, to be prepared for the job, for that game, not to get caught up in the last game. Always stay in the present as far as how you view the games. Understand what's going on out there, and just remember that you're only as good as your last game.
At halftime, man, he'd look at me and he'd say, listen, you know this game, right? But we don't have time for you to explain something. You get in, you get out. You set up something and you tell them why. If you tell them why, Jim, they can't mess with you. That's what he used to tell me.
I just appreciate him a lot. and I appreciate him a lot, primarily because of just what he's done for Northeast Ohio, what he's done for the Cleveland Cavaliers, that great voice. That great voice is what I know.
Well, I knew who he was right away because I've heard his voice on the radio, and very distinctive. If you hear Joe Tait, and then you hear him again, you'll know who it is. He is, I liken him to the top announcers to ever announce the game of basketball. Guys like Chick Hearn, Johnny Mose, okay, and Bob Blackburn. All very distinctive, all very different, but all outstanding.
As most people, I listened to him on the radio. I mean, I was a kid growing up in Southern Ohio. Although I wasn't an NBA fan because we only had it on Sundays on TV, I was a radio fan. So at night, I would flip the dial. I'd hear Jack Buck on KMOX. I'd hear Ernie Harwell out of JR in Detroit calling baseball. And then in the winter, I'd come across 1100 and hear this voice, and it was Joe Tait.
I would wake up in the middle of the night with the light on, the little portable radio next to the bed, and I'd hear static or garbage, some kind of program, because I'd be listening to the Cavs game, but I'd fall asleep. And first I wanted to be Austin Carr when I was a little kid. Well, I knew I was never going to be that. So after that, I wanted to be Joe Tait. How could you not want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this was the guy. This is the man you wanted to be when you were a kid thinking you wanted to be a sportscaster. And everybody did Joe Tait when they're out playing in the driveway or playing on baseball or whatever.
So I was a fan of his from the radio standpoint of, wow, what a play-by-play guy. I mean, I was excited listening to him. And then luckily enough in my career, 20-some years later, I get to spend time with him every day during the season.
I met Joe along the way as I got into the career professionally and ended up really working with him over the last 20 years just about, working in the studio host roles. As I've learned him as a listener and then working with him, it's kind of the same. He's one of a kind. He's really the best.
Joe's a unique individual. Come from a very modest background as I did, and it seemed as if when I came to Cleveland, we hit it off right away. I had known Joe as a broadcaster, but it was really a treat to meet him and then have the opportunity to work with him.
When I started working in the media here in Cleveland, it was wonderful that when I first met him, I introduced myself and said, "Yes, I've watched. I know what you're doing." And from that point on, we kind of became friends, and that was such an honor to me to be able to call the man that I think is the best radio broadcaster I've ever heard a friend.
As I transitioned from an assistant athletic trainer into a head athletic trainer, there's times that in everyone's professional career, there's different challenges. And so to have a friend and a calming voice to recognize that and just kind of help you out throughout your career is phenomenal. And that's what Joe has been for me.
I'm nervous. I'm scared because I'm on a plane full of NBA stars, Mark Price, Brad Daugherty, all these guys. And Mike Fratello's the coach. And so my first, thinking is I'm going to be on a plane with all these guys and this is going to be great. Until Gary tells me, my seat is up in the front of the plane. You're going to be sitting with the coaches right across from Tait. And I was like, Joe Tait?
When I met him, I was terrified, just terrified. I said, Joe, do you have any idea how bad I wanted to be you when I was a kid? I've listened to you, and he wanted no part of that. I don't want to hear it, just all of that.
I was absolutely starstruck. I sat on that plane, and Joe wandered in. He was kind of always one of the last ones to get on the plane. And he sat down and he goes, Joe Tait. And I was like, hi, how are you? and he could not have been nicer. He was a guy who kind of told me how to behave on the plane, don't do this, don't worry, they'll feed you, that kind of thing. And it was quickly thereafter, you just felt like you were sitting across from your friend, your father, because he was just that nice of a guy.
He's known all these security people and attendants for these press boxes all across the country for years. So he puts his case down, and he says, hey, Bob, how are you? How's the family and everything? And I'm standing there, and I'm going, Joe, we got a show to do. I can't stand here and, wait for you. I'm being impatient. But Joe is just being Joe. What Joe was doing was actually showing me that that's the kind of guy that he is. He was more concerned about the people that were around, taking a couple minutes to talk to them. How's everything going? How's your family? We'll get to this other stuff in just a minute. And that taught me a real lesson.
I can't say enough about how much I learned from Joe, who had about 12, 13 years on me, and I was a young broadcaster, anxious, eager, but certainly didn't have nearly the experiences of Joe. And he taught me so many things, and which I still hold and cherish to this very day. Some of the things he taught me as a young broadcaster at that time were not registering. They didn't hit home. But later on in my career, as I evolved, wow, I look back at it and I said, Joe was right on target. And I live by those standards and those teachings to this very day.
He is one of a kind in terms of the tremendous way in which he does broadcasts and the way in which he thinks about that whole business. He's very true to what actually happens. There's not a lot of varnishing, almost none, in fact. He tells it like it is, and at some points in his work with us, while my brother and I owned the team, there were things we didn't want to hear, but we knew he would tell it like it was all the time. So we respected that and appreciated it tremendously.
Well, I think Joe obviously was just an icon, here in Cleveland, and before we even got here as a group. But for my 9 years here, Cavaliers were, synonymous